The old German Shepherd mix had been walking the streets for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to have a real home. His thick brown and black coat was matted and dirty, carrying the smell of rain and car exhaust from countless nights sleeping under bridges and in abandoned doorways. Deep scars crossed his muzzle, telling stories of fights he never wanted but had to survive. Yet despite everything he had endured, his amber eyes still held something special, a gentle warmth that seemed impossible after so much hardship. Nobody knew his real name anymore, not even him. The animal control officers who occasionally spotted him had started calling him Ghost because of how he seemed to disappear whenever they got close. He had learned to be invisible, to move through shadows to find scraps of food in dumpsters behind restaurants when the workers had gone home. His paws were tough as leather from walking on hot pavement and sharp gravel, but his spirit remained surprisingly unbroken. Ghost had been surviving on his own for almost 4 years now. He barely remembered the puppy farm where he was born, or the first family who bought him as a cute little ball of fur. They had loved him for about 6 months until he grew too big for their small apartment and became too much work for their busy lifestyle. One morning, they simply drove him to a park across town and left him there with a bowl of water and a pat on the head, telling him to be a good boy as they walked away forever. The first few weeks alone had been terrifying. Ghost waited by that park bench for 3 days straight, certain his family would come back for him. He barely ate, afraid to leave his post in case he missed them. Other dogs in the area tried to warn him, sharing their own stories of abandonment, but Ghost couldn't accept that his people would really leave him behind. When animal control finally came for him, he was so weak from waiting that he couldn't run. The shelter had been crowded and loud, filled with barking dogs and crying cats, all hoping for their own second chances. Ghost was assigned kennel number 47, a small concrete space with metal bars that reminded him more of prison than hope. The volunteers were kind but overworked, and with so many animals needing attention, individual dogs often got lost in the system. Ghost waited there for 8 long months, watching smaller, younger, prettier dogs get adopted while families walked past his kennel without a second glance. His size worked against him. Many people wanted lapdogs or puppies, not a full-grown German Shepherd mix who took up space and ate expensive food. His scars made him look dangerous to those who didn't take time to see past his appearance. The shelter workers knew he was gentle, but potential adopters only saw what they assumed was an aggressive fighting dog. Day after day, Ghost would press his nose against the bars, hoping someone would stop and look into his eyes long enough to see his true nature. The escape happened almost by accident. During a thunderstorm that knocked out the power, an electrical malfunction caused several kennel doors to swing open. While other dogs ran wild through the facility, Ghost simply walked quietly toward the exit, as if he had been planning this moment for months. By morning, when the staff discovered the breakout, Ghost was already miles away, padding silently through suburban neighborhoods as the sun rose behind him. Freedom was both a gift and a curse. Ghost was grateful to be out of the concrete kennel, but the world outside was full of dangers he had never faced before. Cars moved fast and drivers rarely watched for stray animals. People shooed him away from their yards and called animal control if he lingered too long in one place. Finding food became a daily challenge that required intelligence, patience, and sometimes a willingness to dig through garbage that made his stomach turn. He learned to time his movements with human schedules, traveling through residential areas when people were at work, approaching restaurants only after closing time, staying hidden during busy daylight hours when animal control officers were most active. Gas stations became his favorite stops because truck drivers sometimes shared their sandwiches, and the bright lights kept him safe from wild animals during long winter nights. The seasons changed around Ghost as he wandered from town to town. Summer brought unbearable heat that made his thick coat feel like a furnace, forcing him to seek shade under highway overpasses and pant constantly to avoid heat stroke. Winter was worse. Snow and ice made every step painful, and finding warm shelter became a matter of survival. He learned to recognize the signs of approaching storms and would spend entire days searching for safe places to wait out blizzards. Through it all, Ghost maintained his gentle nature. When children approached him in parks, he would sit perfectly still and let them pet him, even though their parents often pulled them away in panic. He never snapped or growled even when people threw rocks or sprayed him with water hoses. Some deep instinct told him that showing aggression would only make his situation worse, so he absorbed every cruelty with patient dignity. Other stray animals became his companions during the loneliest times. An old tabby cat named Patches shared his hideout under a train bridge for several months, and they developed an unlikely friendship based on mutual protection and shared meals. Patches taught Ghost which dumpsters had the best food and which neighborhoods were safe to sleep in. When Patches was eventually caught by animal control, Ghost waited by the bridge for weeks hoping his friend would return. The constant moving began to wear on Ghost's body and spirit. His once strong muscles grew lean from irregular meals, and his beautiful coat became increasingly tangled and dull. He developed a slight limp in his right back leg from stepping on broken glass during a desperate midnight food search. Most heartbreaking of all, he began to forget what human love felt like, the gentle touch of caring hands, the sound of his name being called with affection, the simple comfort of sleeping inside when storms raged outside. Yet somehow, those amber eyes continued to hold their warmth. Even as Ghost's hope faded, some essential part of him refused to give up entirely. He would still approach humans with cautious optimism, still wag his tail hopefully when people looked his way, still dream of a family who might see past his rough exterior to the loyal heart beating underneath. This stubborn faith would soon prove to be his salvation, though he had no way of knowing that his years of wandering were about to end in the most unexpected way possible. Sarah Martinez had been having one of those days where everything seemed to go wrong. Her coffee maker broke that morning. Traffic made her late for work, and her boss assigned her an impossible deadline for a project that should have taken weeks. As the marketing manager for a small software company, she was used to stress, but lately everything felt overwhelming. Her husband, David, had been working double shifts at the hospital, and their 8-year-old daughter, Emma, was struggling with math homework that might as well have been written in ancient Greek. The grocery store trip was supposed to be quick, just milk, bread, and something easy for dinner. But as Sarah pushed her cart through the parking lot, balancing her phone between her shoulder and ear while trying to schedule Emma's dentist appointment, she almost didn't notice the large dog sitting perfectly still beside the shopping cart return area, almost but not quite. Something about his posture caught her attention first. Unlike most stray dogs she had encountered, who were either aggressive or cowering, this one sat with remarkable dignity. His back was straight, his head held high, but there was nothing threatening in his stance. He wasn't begging or approaching shoppers, just sitting quietly as if he was waiting for someone who might never come. Sarah finished her phone call and found herself studying the dog more carefully. His coat was obviously dirty and matted, and she could see he was much too thin. Several scars marked his face, giving him a battle-worn appearance that should have been frightening. But when their eyes met, Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. Those amber eyes held such depth, such intelligence, and underneath all the weariness was an unmistakable gentleness that spoke directly to her heart. The dog didn't move as she approached, didn't even wag his tail, but his ears perked forward slightly and his head tilted in a way that seemed almost hopeful. Sarah knelt down a few feet away, extending her hand slowly. "Hey there, big guy," she said softly. "What are you doing out here all alone?" Ghost studied this woman carefully. Experience had taught him to be cautious around humans, but something about her voice was different. She spoke to him the way people used to speak to him when he was young and loved, before he learned that kindness could disappear without warning. Her scent carried hints of vanilla and something that reminded him of home, though he couldn't quite remember what home had smelled like. "You're beautiful," Sarah continued, still keeping her voice gentle and low. "Somebody must be missing you terribly." She noticed that despite his obvious hunger, his ribs were showing through his coat. The dog made no move toward her grocery bags. Most strays would have been sniffing around for food, but this one simply watched her with those incredible eyes, as if he was trying to read her intentions. There was something almost human in his expression, a sadness mixed with hope that reminded her of Emma when she was trying very hard to be brave about something scary. "Sarah?" David's voice made her jump. She had been so focused on the dog that she hadn't heard her husband's car pull up. "What are you doing?" David Martinez was a practical man. As an emergency room nurse, he saw the results of animal attacks more often than most people, and his first instinct was always safety. But as he walked over to where his wife was kneeling, something about the scene made him pause. The dog was massive, easily 80 pounds, and clearly strong enough to be dangerous. Yet there was nothing threatening about his behavior. In fact, David had rarely seen such calm patience in any animal, wild or domestic. Look at his eyes, David, Sarah said without taking her gaze off the dog. Really look at them. David sighed but knelt down beside his wife. He expected to see the unpredictable wildness that usually marked stray animals, or perhaps the flat, dead stare of a dog who had been broken by abuse. Instead, he found himself looking into eyes that seemed to hold entire stories. Pain, yes, but also wisdom and a surprising capacity for trust despite obvious hardship. He's been hurt, David said quietly, his medical training automatically cataloging the visible injuries. Those scars look old, probably from fighting. And he's definitely malnourished. But he's not aggressive, Sarah pointed out. Look how still he's being. A mean dog would have either run away or threatened us by now. Ghost watched the two humans discuss him, understanding more of their conversation than they might have expected. Dogs were natural readers of human emotion, and he could sense the conflict between the woman's compassion and the man's caution. He had been in this situation before. People who were drawn to help him, but ultimately decided he was too much trouble, or too risky to take on. Emma Martinez chose that moment to stick her head out of David's car window. Mom, Dad, why are you talking to that dog? Stay in the car, sweetheart, David called back, but Emma was already climbing out. At 8 years old, she had inherited her mother's stubborn streak and her own powerful sense of curiosity about the world around her. Emma approached the group with the fearless confidence that only children possess.
She had been asking for a dog for 2 years.
And her parents kept saying maybe when you're older or when we have more time. Now here was a dog right in front of them, and he looked like he needed help. He's really big, Emma said, stopping just out of arm's reach. But his eyes look sad. Why does he look so sad? Ghost's entire body language changed when he saw the little girl. His tail, which had remained still throughout the adult conversation, began to wag slowly. Something about children had always brought out his gentlest instincts, perhaps because they approached him without the fear and prejudice that adults carried. This little girl looked at him with pure curiosity, not suspicion. I think he's been alone for a long time, Sarah told her daughter, and he's probably very hungry. Can we give him some food? Emma asked. We just bought groceries. David found himself caught between his practical concerns and the unusual situation unfolding before him. Everything he knew about stray dogs suggested caution. They could carry diseases, might be unpredictable, and taking on a large, unknown animal was a serious responsibility. But watching the dog's gentle interaction with his family was slowly changing his perspective. We can't just feed him and leave him here, Sarah said, voicing the thought they were all having. Look at him, David. He's not going to survive much longer on his own. Ghost seemed to sense that a decision was being made about his future. He remained perfectly still, hardly daring to hope but unable to stop himself from imagining what it might feel like to belong somewhere again. The little girl's presence filled him with a warmth he had almost forgotten existed, and the woman's kind voice reminded him of everything he had lost years ago. The animal shelter is probably closed by now, David said slowly, his nurse's instincts warring with his growing concern for the animal. And tomorrow is Sunday. He could stay in our garage tonight, Sarah suggested carefully, just until we figure out what to do. We can't leave him here in the parking lot, like what if something happens to him? Emma clapped her hands together. Can he really stay with us? Ghost's tail wagged a little faster, and for the first time in years he allowed himself to feel something that might have been hope. These people were different from the ones who had thrown rocks or called him names. They were taking time to really see him, to consider his needs, to treat him like he mattered. What none of them realized was that this chance encounter would change all of their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The ride home in David's SUV was the first time Ghost had been inside a vehicle since the day his original family abandoned him. Sarah sat in the back seat beside him, speaking in soft, reassuring tones while Emma chattered excitedly from the front passenger seat about all the things they could do together. Ghost pressed himself against the far door, not from fear but from years of learned behavior about taking up as little space as possible. What should we call him? Emma asked, turning around to study their unexpected passenger. He needs a name. He probably already has one, David said, glancing in the rearview mirror. Someone owned him once. You can tell by how well-behaved he is. Ghost's ears perked up at various words throughout their conversation, but none of them sparked recognition. His original name had been Max, but that felt like a lifetime ago, belonging to a different dog who had been loved and cared for. The shelter workers had called him various things, and on the streets he had simply been that big dog or worse. The name Ghost given by animal control officers was unknown to him. How about Buddy? Emma suggested, or Rex? Rex sounds strong. Sarah watched the dog's reactions carefully. Let's get to know him first, honey. Names are important. We want to choose the right one. The Martinez family lived in a modest two-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The garage was clean and spacious, with concrete floors and storage shelves along the walls. David had laid out old blankets to make a comfortable sleeping area, and Sarah brought a large bowl of water and some leftover chicken from their refrigerator. Ghost approached the food cautiously at first, as if he couldn't quite believe it was really for him. When no one tried to take it away, he ate slowly and deliberately, savoring each bite. Years of unpredictable meals had taught him never to waste food or eat too quickly, even when he was desperately hungry. "Look how polite he is," Emma whispered from the doorway connecting the garage to the kitchen. "He's not gobbling it up like Patches does." Patches was their neighbor's golden retriever, who attacked his food bowl like it might disappear at any moment. After eating, Ghost explored his temporary shelter carefully. He sniffed each corner, cataloging scents and identifying potential escape routes, old habits from his street days that might never completely fade. But something about this place felt different from the many temporary shelters he had known. It smelled like safety, like people who cared about keeping their space clean and organized. The first night was difficult for everyone. Ghost was grateful to be inside and protected from the weather, but the enclosed space triggered memories of his time in the animal shelter. He paced restlessly, his nails clicking on the concrete floor. Emma kept sneaking downstairs to check on him, despite her parents' instructions to let him settle in alone. "He's scared," she whispered to Sarah after her third unauthorized visit. "He keeps walking back and forth like he wants to leave but doesn't know where to go." Sarah found herself equally restless. Every time she heard movement from the garage, she wondered if they had made the right choice. What did they really know about this dog? He seemed gentle, but appearances could be deceiving. David had reminded her several times about liability issues. If the dog bit someone while in their care, they could face serious legal consequences. But when she finally crept downstairs at 2 a.m. to check on their guest, she found him lying quietly on the blankets, his head resting on his paws but his eyes wide open and alert. The moment he saw her, his tail gave a tentative wag against the floor. "Can't sleep either?" Sarah asked softly, settling down on the floor a few feet away from him. "I know this must be confusing. We're strangers to you and you don't know if you can trust us yet." Ghost studied her face in the dim light filtering through the garage windows. Her voice carried none of the tension or false cheer that humans often used around animals they were afraid of. This was the same genuine kindness he had heard in the parking lot, and it stirred something deep in his chest that he had almost forgotten existed. "We're good people," Sarah continued, as if reading his thoughts. "I know you have no reason to believe that, but we are. My husband worries because that's his job. He sees people get hurt and wants to protect us. But he has a good heart. And Emma, well, you've already figured out that Emma is pretty special." To her amazement, Ghost slowly stood up and took 2 careful steps toward her. He stopped just within arm's reach and sat down again, his posture formal but his expression hopeful. Sarah extended her hand palm up, letting him make the choice about contact. Ghost sniffed her fingers carefully, processing the complex layers of scent that told him about her life. He could detect traces of her work environment, her family, her daily routines. But underlying everything was something he had learned to recognize as kindness, not the superficial kind that disappeared when things got difficult, but the deep, steady variety that might actually be trustworthy. When he finally allowed her to touch his head, Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. His fur was coarser than she had expected, matted in places where burrs and dirt had tangled into knots that would require patient grooming to remove. But underneath the neglect, she could feel the strong, noble bone structure of a dog who had once been magnificent. "Tomorrow we'll take you to see a veterinarian," she promised, gently stroking behind his ears. "Get you checked out, cleaned up, see if you have a microchip that might help us find your family." Ghost's tail stopped wagging at the word veterinarian. His experiences with medical care had been limited to emergency treatment at animal control facilities, and those memories were not pleasant. But something about this woman's touch told him that whatever happened next, might be different from what he had known before. The next morning brought new challenges and small victories. Emma was up early, eager to spend time with their guest and disappointed to find her parents insisted on careful supervision. Ghost seemed more relaxed in daylight, and he allowed Emma to sit nearby while he ate breakfast, another bowl of chicken mixed with some dry dog food David had purchased during an early morning store run. "He likes me," Emma announced confidently. "Look, his tail wags when I talk to him." It was true. Something about the little girl's voice and energy brought out a playfulness in Ghost that he hadn't felt in years. When she accidentally dropped a tennis ball she had been playing with, he instinctively retrieved it and brought it back to her, the first time in years he had engaged in anything resembling play. David watched these interactions with growing amazement. "That's not normal stray dog behavior," he told Sarah quietly. "He's been trained. Somebody put time and effort into teaching him manners." The veterinary appointment was scheduled for Monday morning, giving them the weekend to observe their unexpected guest and make decisions about his future. Ghost seemed to understand that he was being evaluated, and he made every effort to show his best behavior. He came when called, sat on command, and even managed a tentative tail wag when David offered him a treat. But the real breakthrough came Sunday evening, when a sudden thunderstorm rolled through their neighborhood. Ghost had always hated storms. The loud noises triggered memories of his worst nights on the streets, when he had huddled under bridges while rain soaked through his coat and lightning split the sky above him. As the first rumbles of thunder echoed through the garage, Ghost began to pace anxiously. His breathing became rapid and shallow, and he started the repetitive walking pattern that indicated rising panic. Emma, watching through the kitchen door, immediately recognized distress. "He's scared of the storm," she told her parents. "Look how he's shaking." Without waiting for permission, Emma opened the door and stepped into the garage. Ghost looked at her with wide, frightened eyes, his usual dignity forgotten in the face of his phobia. Emma sat down on the floor and began talking to him in the same soft, steady voice her mother used when Emma herself was scared. "It's okay," she said simply. "It's just noise. The storm can't hurt you in here. You're safe now." To everyone's amazement, Ghost approached the little girl and carefully laid down beside her, his large body trembling but his breathing beginning to slow. Emma gently placed her small hand on his shoulder, and gradually his shaking subsided. Sarah and David exchanged looks across the kitchen. They both understood that something significant had just happened, not just a dog accepting comfort, but the beginning of a bond that might change everything. Dr. Jennifer Kim had been practicing veterinary medicine for 15 years, and she had learned to read both animals and their humans within the first few minutes of meeting them. When the Martinez family walked into her clinic Monday morning with the large German Shepherd mix, she immediately sensed this was not a typical pet visit. The dog moved with careful dignity despite his obvious poor condition. His coat was matted and dull, his ribs visible through patchy fur, and several old scars marked his face and legs. But what struck Dr. Kim most were his eyes, alert, intelligent, and surprisingly trusting for an animal who had clearly endured significant hardship. "We found him in a grocery store parking lot," Sarah explained as they settled into the examination room. "He's been living on his own for we don't know how long." Ghost stood perfectly still as Dr. Kim approached, though his body remained tense with nervous energy. Years of rough handling by animal control officers had taught him to be wary of strangers with authority. But something about this woman's calm presence reminded him of the few kind souls he had encountered during his wandering years. "Hello, handsome," Dr. Kim said softly, extending her hand for him to sniff. "Let's see what your story is." The examination revealed both heartbreaking and encouraging news. Ghost was severely underweight, probably 15 to 20 pounds below his healthy range. His teeth showed signs of gnawing on inappropriate objects, likely garbage, bones, and whatever else he could find during hungry times on the streets. Several small wounds on his paws had healed poorly, leaving permanent reminders of his difficult journey. But underneath the neglect, Dr. Kim found evidence of excellent breeding and early care. His bone structure was perfect, his muscle tone surprisingly good considering his ordeal, and his basic health was remarkably sound for a dog who had survived years without veterinary attention. "He's about 6 years old," Dr. Kim announced after checking his teeth and joints. "And despite everything he's been through, he's in better shape than I expected." This is a strong, resilient animal. The microchip scanner produced no results, which wasn't surprising but was still disappointing. Many dogs from Ghost's generation weren't chipped, and even those who were often had outdated registry information when families moved or changed phone numbers. No chip means no easy way to trace his original owners, Dr. Kim explained. But given his condition and the length of time he's obviously been on his own, it's likely they're not actively searching anymore. Emma, who had been unusually quiet during the examination, spoke up. So nobody is looking for him? It's possible someone is, Dr. Kim said gently. But after this long, most people assume their pet has died or moved on permanently. The grooming session that followed was a revelation. As layers of dirt, matted fur, and street grime were carefully removed, the magnificent animal underneath began to emerge. Ghost's coat, once cleaned and brushed, revealed beautiful patterns of black, brown, and silver. His face, freed from tangles and cleaned of old scars' debris, showed noble features and expressive eyes that seemed to grow brighter by the hour. He's gorgeous, Sarah breathed, seeing him properly for the first time. Look at those markings around his eyes, like a mask. Ghost seemed to understand that he looked different. He carried himself with more confidence as they prepared to leave the clinic, his head held higher and his tail wagging more freely. For the first time in years, he felt clean and comfortable in his own skin. Dr. Kim sent them home with medications for minor skin infections, high-quality food to help him gain weight, and strict instructions about gradual reintegration into normal life. He's been in survival mode for years, she explained. His body and mind need time to adjust to safety and regular care. The drive home sparked an important family discussion. Emma had been calling him boy or good dog since the weekend, but Sarah felt strongly that he deserved a real name, something that honored both his difficult past and hopeful future. What about Phoenix? David suggested, rising from the ashes of his old life. That's pretty, but it's kind of long, Emma said practically. What about Scout? He looks like he's always watching and learning things. Ghost's ears perked up at several names during their discussion, but when Emma said Scout, something clicked. It wasn't his original name, but it felt right somehow, suggesting both the careful observation skills that had kept him alive on the streets and the hopeful exploration of new possibilities. Scout, Sarah repeated thoughtfully. I like it. What do you think, big guy? Does Scout fit you? The newly named Scout wagged his tail enthusiastically, as if he approved of finally having an identity again. For years he had been nameless, just another stray dog trying to survive. Now he was Scout, still the same animal, but somehow transformed by the simple act of being claimed and named by people who cared. The first week of Scout's official residence in the Martinez household brought daily discoveries and challenges. His street instincts remained strong. He hoarded food in corners, startled at sudden movements, and positioned himself near exits where he could escape if necessary. But gradually, small signs of trust began to emerge. Scout started following Sarah around the house, maintaining a respectful distance but clearly wanting to be near her. He learned the family's daily routines and began anticipating mealtimes, walks, and Emma's return from school. Most remarkably, he began to play, tentatively at first, then with growing enthusiasm as he remembered what joy felt like. Emma became his favorite companion for play sessions. Her boundless energy and lack of fear brought out a puppy-like side of Scout that had been buried under years of survival anxiety. They developed elaborate games of fetch and hide-and-seek that often left both of them exhausted and happy. But it was David who witnessed Scout's most significant breakthrough. Working a late shift at the hospital, David came home near midnight to find Scout waiting by the front door, not because he wanted to leave, but because he had learned to recognize the sound of David's car and wanted to greet him. He was sitting right here when I pulled into the driveway, David told Sarah the next morning, just waiting like he belongs here. The transformation wasn't without setbacks. Scout still panicked during thunderstorms, though Emma's presence helped calm him. He remained wary of strangers and needed careful introduction to new people or situations. His eating habits, formed by years of food scarcity, required patience and understanding. But with each passing day, the scared, abandoned dog was disappearing, replaced by an animal who was remembering how to trust, how to love, and how to be part of a family. The scars on his face would always tell the story of his difficult years, but his eyes now held something they had lost long ago. hope for the future and faith in the humans who had chosen to see past his rough exterior to the gentle heart underneath. 3 weeks after that chance encounter in the grocery store parking lot, Scout had gained 8 pounds and developed a coat so glossy that strangers stopped to admire him during walks. More importantly, he had begun to believe that this new life might actually be permanent, that he had finally found the family who would never drive him to a park and walk away. 2 months into his new life, Scout faced his biggest test yet when the Martinez family decided he was ready to move from the garage into the house. The transition represented everything he had dreamed of during those cold nights on the streets, but it also triggered deep-seated anxieties about losing this precious gift he had been given. Sarah noticed his hesitation the moment she opened the door between the garage and kitchen. Scout stood at the threshold, his body language clearly torn between desire and fear. Years of being unwelcome in human spaces had taught him that indoor access was a privilege that could be revoked without warning. "It's okay," Sarah said gently, settling down on the kitchen floor just inside the doorway. "This is your home now. You belong here with us." Scout took one careful step across the threshold, then another. His paws touched the smooth kitchen tile, and he froze, overwhelmed by the sensory differences between his concrete garage and this warm, food-scented space where the family spent most of their time. Everything here smelled like them, their individual scents layered together into something that meant safety and belonging. Emma, who had been watching the momentous occasion from the living room, couldn't contain her excitement.
"He's inside."
"Mom, Scout is finally inside with us." The first night indoors was magical and terrifying for Scout. He had forgotten what it felt like to be surrounded by the sounds of family life. David watching the news, Sarah doing dishes, Emma practicing piano. These ordinary domestic noises created a symphony of normalcy that he had lost years ago, but old habits died hard. Scout positioned himself strategically in the living room where he could see all entrances and exits, his survival instincts still operating despite his growing trust. When David got up suddenly to answer the phone, Scout tensed and shifted position, ready to flee if necessary. He's still expecting something bad to happen, David observed quietly to Sarah. It's going to take time for him to really believe this is permanent. The breakthrough came 3 days later, during what started as an ordinary evening. Emma was sprawled on the living room carpet doing homework. Sarah was reading on the couch, and David was catching up on medical journals. Scout lay in his chosen spot near the doorway, watching over his family like a gentle guardian. When Emma sighed dramatically over a particularly difficult math problem, Scout surprised everyone by getting up and walking over to her. He settled down beside her, his large body providing warm comfort against her side. Emma automatically reached over to pet him, and for the first time since entering the house, Scout's whole body relaxed completely. "Look," Sarah whispered to David. "He's really settling in." From that moment forward, Scout began to claim his place in the family with growing confidence. He learned that the soft couch was acceptable for napping, that mealtimes included a special bowl just for him, and that Emma's bedtime routine now included saying goodnight to him personally. His relationship with each family member developed its own unique character. With Emma, he became a playful companion and patient listener to her childhood troubles. She would tell him about problems at school, dreams for the future, and fears about growing up, and Scout would listen with the serious attention that only dogs can provide to children's concerns. Sarah became his primary caregiver and the human he trusted most completely. She handled his medications, arranged his veterinary visits, and seemed to understand his needs almost intuitively. Scout followed her around the house not from anxiety anymore, but from genuine affection and the simple pleasure of being near someone who loved him. Unconditionally, David represented security and protection to Scout. The big man's calm presence and medical knowledge made Scout feel safe in ways he hadn't experienced since puppyhood. When strangers came to the door or unexpected noises startled him, Scout looked to David for reassurance about whether situations were dangerous or benign. The neighbors began to notice the Martinez family's new addition during daily walks around the neighborhood. Scout's magnificent appearance and perfect leash manners impressed everyone who met him. Mrs. Chen from next door commented that she had never seen such a well-behaved large dog, and Mr. Johnson across the street asked if Scout was a trained therapy animal. "He's just naturally gentle," Sarah would explain, though she knew the truth was more complex. Scout's perfect behavior came from years of understanding that any sign of aggression or poor manners could mean the difference between acceptance and rejection, between shelter and homelessness. The first real challenge to Scout's integration came when Emma's best friend Katie visited for a sleepover. Katie had always been afraid of large dogs, and Scout's size made her nervous despite his calm demeanor. Scout seemed to sense her fear and went out of his way to appear non-threatening, lying down whenever she entered a room and keeping his movements slow and predictable. "Why is he being so careful around me?" Katie asked Emma, genuinely curious. "Because he knows you're scared," Emma explained with the matter-of-fact wisdom of childhood. "He doesn't want you to be afraid of him." Scout understands feelings really well. By the end of the weekend, Katie was sitting on the floor next to Scout, reading him stories and marveling at how he seemed to listen to every word. "He's like a person in a dog's body," she told her own parents when they picked her up. Scout's intelligence became more apparent as he settled into family life. He learned to distinguish between different types of phone calls, regular conversations that he could ignore versus emergency calls that sent David rushing to the hospital for urgent cases. He understood the difference between normal visitor knocks and delivery trucks, alerting the family appropriately without excessive barking. Most remarkably, Scout developed an uncanny ability to sense emotional distress in his humans. When Sarah had a particularly stressful day at work, he would appear beside her chair with his head resting gently on her lap. When Emma struggled with a difficult friendship situation at school, Scout would station himself near her room, available for comfort without being intrusive. The day David came home exhausted after losing a patient during surgery, Scout seemed to understand immediately that something was wrong. Instead of his usual enthusiastic greeting, Scout approached quietly and simply sat beside David's chair, offering silent companionship during a difficult time. "It's like he knows exactly what we need," David told Sarah that night. "I've never seen anything like it." Dr. Kim, during Scout's 3-month checkup, was amazed by his transformation. He had gained the appropriate weight, his coat was thick and glossy, and his confident posture showed no trace of the anxious, defensive animal who had first entered her clinic. "This is what proper care and love can do," she told the Martinez family. "But it's also testament to his remarkable resilience. Not every dog could have survived what he went through and still maintained the capacity for trust and affection." Scout's past occasionally surfaced in unexpected ways. The sound of garbage trucks still made him anxious, reminding him of nights spent scavenging for food. Sudden movements from strangers could cause him to step protectively in front of Emma or Sarah. But these moments became less frequent as his sense of security grew stronger. The family established new traditions that included Scout as a full member. He had his own Christmas stocking, received birthday presents on the anniversary of the day they found him, and was included in family photos and vacation planning. Scout seemed to understand his special status and carried himself with the quiet dignity of an animal who knew he was valued and loved. One evening, as Scout lay stretched out on the living room carpet with Emma using his side as a pillow while she watched television, Sarah realized that she couldn't imagine their family without him anymore. The scared, hungry dog from the parking lot had become such an integral part of their daily life that his absence would leave a hole impossible to fill. "Remember when you were worried about taking him in?" she asked David, who was absently scratching behind Scout's ears while reading. "I was protecting us," David said, but his tone was sheepish. "I couldn't have imagined this. Look at him. He's not just our dog, he's like Emma's guardian angel." Scout's tail thumped against the floor at the sound of his name, but he didn't lift his head from where it rested near Emma's feet. He had learned that love meant being present without demanding attention, offering comfort without being overwhelming, and providing security through simple, steady presence. As winter approached, marking nearly 6 months since Scout had joined their family, the Martinez household settled into comfortable routines that included their gentle giant as an essential element. Scout had not only found his forever home, but had enriched the lives of the humans who had chosen to see past his rough exterior to the loving heart that had never stopped hoping for a second chance. 1 year after that fateful meeting in the grocery store parking lot, Scout had become such an integral part of the Martinez family that neighbors often commented they couldn't remember a time when he wasn't there. His transformation was so complete that Dr. Kim used his case as an example in veterinary conferences about the resilience, of animals and the healing power of consistent love and care. The anniversary of Gotcha Day, as Emma had dubbed it, was marked with a special celebration that highlighted just how far they had all come. Scout now weighed a healthy 92 pounds, his coat gleamed with proper nutrition and care, and his once fearful eyes sparkled with confidence and joy. The scars on his face had faded to silver lines that added character, rather than suggesting past trauma. But perhaps more importantly, Scout had discovered his true purpose in life. What had begun as simple survival and gratitude had evolved into something much deeper, a genuine calling to serve and protect the family that had saved him. This became dramatically clear during an incident that occurred on a Tuesday evening in late autumn. Sarah was working late at the office, David was at the hospital, and Emma was home alone doing homework when Scout suddenly became alert and restless. His ears were pricked forward, his body tense with attention focused on something outside that Emma couldn't hear or see. Scout positioned himself between Emma and the front door, a low warning growl rumbling in his chest, the first time anyone in the family had heard him make such a sound. Emma, trusting Scout's instincts completely after a year of witnessing his uncanny ability to sense trouble, immediately called her father. "Scout is acting really strange," she whispered into the phone. "He's standing by the door like something's wrong outside." David, who had come to respect Scout's judgment as much as anyone in the family, told Emma to lock all the doors and stay away from windows while he called their neighbor Mr. Johnson to check on the house. When Mr. Johnson investigated, he discovered someone had been attempting to break into cars parked along their street, and Scout had detected the intruder's presence long before any human would have noticed. "That dog probably prevented a break-in," the police officer who responded told the family later. "Animals often sense threats before we do, but most pets don't have the protective instincts to act on it the way he did." This incident marked a turning point in how the neighborhood viewed Scout. Word spread quickly about how the former stray had protected Emma, and suddenly Scout was being hailed as a local hero. Children who had been afraid of his size now approached him with admiration, and elderly residents felt safer knowing he was keeping watch over their quiet street. Scout seemed to understand his elevated status, but remained humble about his role. He continued his daily routines with quiet dignity, but neighbors began to notice that he paid special attention to vulnerable members of their community. He would slow his walking pace when passing elderly residents working in their gardens, accepting gentle pets and offering companionship to those who seemed lonely. Emma, now 9 years old, had grown into the perfect companion for Scout. Their bond had deepened into something that transcended typical pet-owner relationships. Scout attended her soccer games, sitting calmly on the sidelines, while other dogs barked and pulled at their leashes. He seemed to understand that Emma needed him to be her steady, reliable supporter through the challenges of growing up. "He's like my best friend who never judges me or gets mad at me," Emma told her school counselor during a routine check-in. "When I'm sad or scared, Scout just knows, and he makes everything better just by being there." The counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was so impressed by Emma's description of her relationship with Scout that she asked if the family would consider allowing Scout to visit the school as part of their emotional support program. After proper evaluation and certification, Scout began making monthly visits to help children who were struggling with anxiety, family problems, or social difficulties. Scout's gentle nature and intuitive understanding of human emotions made him a natural therapy dog. Children who refused to talk to adults would whisper secrets to Scout, somehow finding comfort in his non-judgmental presence and wise amber eyes. Teachers reported that students looked forward to Scout days and often showed improved behavior and academic performance in the weeks following his visits. Sarah found herself becoming an advocate for animal rescue organizations, sharing Scout's story at adoption events and helping other families see past the rough exteriors of shelter dogs to find their own hidden treasures. Scout accompanied her to these events, serving as a living example of what patience, love, and second chances could accomplish. "People see Scout now and they can't believe he was ever homeless," Sarah would tell potential adopters. "But every dog has the potential for this kind of transformation if they find the right family." David, who had initially been the most cautious about bringing Scout home, now couldn't imagine their family without him. Scout had become his walking companion on early morning jogs, his quiet presence during late-night study sessions, and his trusted guardian when David worked overnight shifts at the hospital. I used to think rescue dogs were too much work and too risky, David admitted to a colleague who was considering adopting a shelter pet. But Scout didn't just join our family, he made us better people. He taught Emma about compassion, gave Sarah a sense of purpose, and showed me that sometimes the best things in life come from taking calculated risks for the right reasons. As Scout's second gotcha day approached, the Martinez family reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed since that chance encounter in the parking lot. Emma was more confident and empathetic, having learned about responsibility and unconditional love from caring for Scout. Sarah had discovered a passion for animal advocacy that brought new meaning to her life outside of work. David had developed a deeper appreciation for the healing power of human-animal bonds that influenced his approach to patient care. But perhaps the most significant change was in Scout himself. The fearful, abandoned dog who had once survived by staying invisible had transformed into a confident, loving animal who brought joy and comfort to everyone he met. His eyes, which had once held mainly sadness and wariness, now sparkled with contentment and purpose. On quiet evenings when the family gathered in the living room, Scout would often be found in the center of it all. Emma curled against his side doing homework, Sarah's hand absently stroking his head while she read, David's feet resting comfortably against Scout's warm body while he watched television. In these moments, it was impossible to tell who had rescued whom. The scared dog who had once sat alone in a parking lot, hoping someone would see past his rough exterior, had not only found a family but had become the heart of that family. Scout's story had come full circle, from abandonment to hope, from survival to service, from being unwanted to being absolutely essential. Every morning when Scout woke up in his comfortable bed in the Martinez living room, surrounded by the people who loved him unconditionally, he was reminded that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the simple decision to look into someone's eyes and choose to see their potential rather than their past. The kindness in his eyes that had first captured Sarah's attention in that parking lot had been returned to him 1,000-fold, proving that love, patience, and second chances could indeed transform lives in the most extraordinary ways.